All right, so even though Snake Eyes is still the best deck, there are still many other contenders out there, and a lot of them are budget friendly. You're gonna spend about $100 for all of the decks we're gonna be discussing in today's video. There's also a lot of different ones, so I'm pretty sure you're gonna be able to find something that suits your playstyle. But when you're done watching this video, like it if you enjoyed it, and let me know if you're going to be playing anything from this little list that I compiled today, or which deck you're going to be running overall in this format. Again, it doesn't have to be Snake Eyes, because some of these decks on the list actually have really good Snake Eyes matchups. So let's go ahead and get started. The first deck is going to be Flunder. Now, yeah, not everyone likes Flunder, but if it suits your playstyle, I think it's just an awesome deck to pick up right now. It's doing well, it is extremely budget friendly, and you can pretty much incorporate any kind of non-engine that you want. Now with this deck that I have here on the screen, you're going to be spending about $60 for the entire core. And I also counted most of the cards that pretty much go into the core, if you know what I mean. So there's Shifter and Duality and Terraforming and just, Harpy's Feather Storm. All of these cards are budget. And if you look at the extra deck, I actually counted most of the extra deck as well. And I'm pretty sure Prosperity is also part of this calculation. So you are spending for the entire deck, and then you just have to add a couple things, which would be something along the lines of Sky Crisis if you want, Access Code, and also Thrust. So Sky Crisis is about $35. You don't have to play these cards. This is, in my opinion, never a thing, like a written rule in Yu-Gi-Oh! You have to play this, but you are upping some of your chances of doing well. Now, this mainly goes for a card like Thrust because it just works so well in Flunder. But there's also the reality of, you can't always spend for the entire core and then a couple more expensive cards to make your odds better. So what you can do is you can slowly add on top of it, and you can slowly add cards like Thrust, which are a little more expensive but can help you in the long run in some other decks as well. So for Thrust, you're going to be spending about almost $60 for one copy, which is quite a lot, but it is, an extremely powerful card, and hopefully we see a reprint soon, so you can also wait for that. And then there's also Access Code, which is around $20, not the worst price for a staple extra deck monster. So for the most part, even if you spend $60 for a core and then you buy one Thrust, for example, you're still around $100 for your spending budget, if you know what I mean. So I think this is fine for a deck that's going to be able to carry you quite a while, actually, because we don't have a ban list on the horizon, and this deck is actually nice into almost every single matchup because D-Shifter is really, really strong. Now there are decks like Tenpai, etc. that do play Shifter and don't lose to it at all, but if you learn those matchups and dedicate some non-engine in your side deck to those, I think you should be fine. So yeah, that's it for Flunder. Again, I think it's one of the best choices on this list, actually, and one of the cheaper ones. Moving on to another stun-like deck, which is just stun, pure stun. Look, I have my own opinions on that, but if you like stun, it is actually quite inexpensive to get a runic engine and then add some other cards on top of it and build any kind of stun deck that you want. Again, you're going to be able to find yourself in fairly good matchups because of the stun properties that this deck has. It is just very easy to try and deck out your opponent with the help of runic cards, and then of course stun them with floodgates. If this is your vibe, stun decks are for you. So you're going to be spending about $25 for the entire runic engine, which is actually great because you're able to pair it together with many other things. And I'm going to have some options for you on the screen. It's going to be Spellbook runic as well as Plunder Patrol runic. Both of those versions are accessible. So with picking up a runic engine, you're going to be able to build pretty much any version imaginable, because for the most part, the other engines, also like Sprite runic and stuff, all of these are cheap. So just getting a runic engine is probably enough. And then if you want to build an actual stun deck, you're going to be spending about $57 for the entire deck. I think the only thing that I haven't counted is the side deck, because that's going to depend on your personal meta. But yeah, I don't think it's that bad to spend about $60 and be able to compete. And then also you can just, throw away the entire stun portion if you feel like that's not something you want to do. Not actually throw away, just put it in your binder and have it for, when you feel like you want to terrorize your locals, and then you can just swap it with like a Sprite engine or something like that and play Sprite Runic, which is also fine. So that's going to be it for the next deck. As for the third deck on today's list, I have got to mention Pearly. Now listen, the entire deck almost is about $112. So you're still very near the $100 mark for the entire deck. The only thing I have not counted, a couple things, are actually Zeus, which is also nice for Flunder. You can include it there if you want. Around $10 is all that's separating you from owning an extra copy of Zeus and being able to include it in any of your decks pretty much. But then we come to the issue that is Crossout. And I call it an issue because it's around $16. And if I remember correctly, this card was fairly cheap upon the reprint because we all kind of felt like it flopped in the TCG. It actually kind of did. And then now it became more popular in the Snake Eye deck as well as the Pearly deck. I think it's really important in this one and in any deck that's able to play a lot of non-engine because you just have so many options to actually play for Crossout. So I did not count this in the calculation. If you want to spend for Crossout, you can, but you do not have to. You just have to take into account that specifically in the Pearly deck, Crossout is quite vital because you do spend quite a lot of your resources with pitching cards, so you don't want to lose to an Ash, but still with another Delicious, that's actually really, really nice. And you do have Stray Pearly Street, which is protecting you from targeting negation on your special summon Pearly monsters. So that's also nice. And you play 3 copies of it. So you should be fine. But again, just like we talked about when it comes to Thrust, you can add on top of your deck. You don't have to get everything at the same time. And if you just spend for the core, you're still spending about $100, like we said. Another card is SP. And I guess this card is going to come up quite a lot. It's expensive, I get that. But like I said before, it's not a written rule that you have to own a specific card in order to win. I think with your skill and good deck building skills overall, you should be fine. But cards like these are going to help you in some situations where they are just the best answer. And it's gonna depend on whether or not you want to participate in a particular event that's like, very important to you, like a big regional or an open or a YCS or something. You can also try and borrow these types of cards. So I still wanted to talk about them and not just ignore them. Of course, you're going to spend a lot more if you spend for an SP as well, because it's around the cost of your entire deck. So make your own choices. But when it comes to Pearly as a whole, as an actual deck, I think it's just such a nice contender because it became much better with Delicious. Your going first is better. Your OTK potential was always there. It is quite high skill intensive, so it's going to teach you a lot. And a lot of times people don't really know how to interact with it. And sometimes they just cannot out an R. So that's also a thing. If you enjoy that type of play style and if you really like a deck with a high learning curve, I think Pearly is definitely the deck for you. Now, as for the next deck, I simply have got to talk about Melodious. I'm actually really excited about this. It's a pendulum deck doing well in 2024, which is kind of unheard of. So for a Melodious core, you're gonna be spending about $124. Again, you're very near the $100 mark, but I did not count Prosperity, which, of course, if you already own a playset, that's not an issue. But what I do have to say is that I counted most of the non-engine and extra deck stuff. So if you look at a regular Melodious deck, I counted everything in the extra deck almost, Herald of Orange Light, which is like $2 a copy. So you should be fine. You don't have to get everything immediately. And if you don't count, some of the cards in the extra deck, and the Heralds, you're still okay. Like the only issue is pretty much first movement solo because it just skyrocketed. Like the graph is literally like that if you look at the chart. But this always happens with older archetypes. So if you have cards like these already on hand, then you're not spending a lot. Definitely not, because this is like around $20 or almost $30 per a single copy of first movement solo. So you're actually spending for this card pretty much. And what's up with Melodious is that it has a really good Snake Eye matchup. And just overall, it's nice into this particular field because it's protecting you from targeting. Like your Melodious cards cannot be targeted, sometimes destroyed by card effects. It is a bounce, non-targeting. It's able to bounce a lot of face-up cards. It banishes 3 cards from the graveyard, and it's just all of these interactions function really, really well into the meta that we have right now. Not to mention that people don't really know where to disrupt this deck, how to hand trap it, and you're almost always going to be able to play it through at least one interruption simply because of the fact that your stuff cannot be targeted a lot of times. So targeting negation, like Effect Veiler Impermanence that see a lot of play, are pretty much going to be rendered useless against you, which is really, really nice. It does have SP, also Sky Crisis, but like we talked about before, you can really decide which kinds of cards you want to play in your extra deck, and again, you're spending about $110 to $20 for the entire deck. As for the last deck, I want to mention Tempai Dragon. Now, don't click off this video. I realize how much Trident Dragon is worth. It's worth a lot. But an actual core of Tempai Dragon is going to cost you about $64. And if you spend for Prosperity as well, which is pretty much part of the core, let's be real, you're going to be spending about $85 in total. And then you can also use like a pot of desires if you want. You can use a lot of hand traps, a lot of non-engine, but that's going to depend on what you already own. As for Trident Dragon and the other extra deck stuff, I think Trident Dragon is definitely getting a reprint. Maybe I'm coping, I don't know, but hopefully it's getting a reprint. What I do want to show you is I pulled up some of the extra deck stuff over here because with Tempai Dragon, it's just going to depend on what you have, how much you're willing to spend, and what your particular field is looking like. Because some versions are playing cards like Samurai Destroyer, for example, or the Time Lord Synchro, which is just nice into the Yubao matchup. But if you don't have a lot of Yubao players at your locals or regionals or whatever, you don't have to focus on those cards. You also have cards like Black Rose, which is really inexpensive. So spending another like 40 to 50 cents, you know, is fine. Trident Dragon, like we discussed, is expensive, but hopefully it's getting a reprint. So this is like the type of card that you maybe borrow or, you know, wait for a reprint if you want to play it. You also have Ruddy Rose Dragon, which is a nice card. Again, you're going to be spending very little for this. Aura's Meteor Burst Dragon, also like $2 to $3 for the card. Let me actually see how much it is. Yeah, it's like $3, something like that. So you're just going to fill up your extra deck with everything that you own and stuff that you're able to get for very, very cheap. And you should still be around the $100 mark. You also have to get Hieratic Seal, which is not expensive. And if you want, you can play the OTK package, which would be Princess, Zealantis, and those kinds of things, which again, like Princess, let me actually check. It should not be that much right now, and if you maybe have it, if you played Snake Eyes or something like that, then you should be fine. But yeah, it is going up slightly. It's around $24. Again, you don't have to play it, but maybe if you're trying to go for this kind of line and you don't have Trident Dragon at the moment, like it's just gonna depend on what you particularly want to do and are able to do. So mainly in these videos of mine, I try and focus on cores in particular, because if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh already, then I assume you have hand traps and cards like Lightning Storm, Cosmic Cyclone, Harpies, evenly matched. Like they are not that expensive. And I did do like a little calculation in one of my previous budget decks videos. You can go check that out if you want. Where pretty much I talk about how much you're spending for like an actual package you have to have, I guess, of all the hand traps. If you want to own Ash, Ogre, Nibiru, like if you want to get most of the staples, you're going to be spending about, I assume $100 or something like that, but you're going to be able to include them in every single deck that you own. So if you did that already, then all you have to do is spend for the cores. Now, I did want to give shout out to some other decks as well. I did not calculate them, but for the most part, they are very, very inexpensive. That's going to be Striker. and also Orcust variants. I do have like a Sprite deck here that I also wanted to showcase, but all of these decks are cheap. And again, you're just gonna have to dig some cards out of your bulk and maybe, you know, dust off your Orcust cards and try and build like a 2019 Sky Striker Orcust deck if you want. You're not gonna be spending a lot, and you just have to add some newer cards that are also not that expensive. So all in all, what I do want to say is I feel like you're going to be able to do well in this meta, even if you're not spending an entire fortune for a Snake Eye deck. So hopefully I gave you some insight into the card prices and deck prices with this video, and I helped you decide maybe what to play. You might pick up Melodious and just confuse some people at your locals, or just play Stun and make some people really sad. You can do whatever you want, but I don't think you're gonna be spending a lot. So hopefully this video was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like. It really helps the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.